I've always said that Trump is not the problem. He's a symptom. Of course, he's a problem, but he is a symptom of the problem. He didn't just come out of nowhere. We didn't get to a country where half the people who live in the richest country the face of the earth has ever seen, and half of them are poor or in poverty. That didn't just happen overnight. We have a messed up system, you know. So that's why you don't get to go on MSNBC anymore, because you're critiquing the system, right? You're critiquing the system.
I know they haven't called.
Can you look me?
Right.
I just want to ask you. Can you look me in the eyes right now, honestly, and say you thought MSNBC would be such a garbage dumpster fire as it has turned into?
No, in fact, I really, look for 6, 7 years, 8 years, starting with Gasland in 2010. So, 7 years, I was a regular on MSNBC. We would talk about fracking. We would talk about climate change. We would talk about the oil spills. Whether that was Melissa Harris Perry's show or Chris Hayes' show or Morning Joe or whatever, they covered the news every once in a while. And they had experts on who knew about fossil fuels, namely myself and Bill McKibben and other people. Now, once Bernie's candidacy came out, and they clearly made a decision that this is during the election, right, that they weren't going to have us on anymore. They would have Bernie on, but they wouldn't have the surrogates. And you can look at the numbers of Bernie versus Hillary. I mean, the most egregious offender on the night of June the 6th, and you know what night I'm talking about. I call this the California coup. The night of the last Democratic primary was on June 7th. MSNBC decided to call the election for Hillary Clinton the night before the election. Like what is this, El Salvador? Like where are we in the 80s? Like what is happening here? Like, oh yes, we know that you're supposed to go to the polls tomorrow, but we just thought we'd let you know the results the night before. That's easier. Hillary won. You don't have to bother. And I remember being in California with Bernie. We did 4 rallies in 3 days, like LA, San Diego, wherever. I mean, it was like, and I was outside of KPFK in Los Angeles, and I had just done like 3 different radio shows, Greg Palast and something else. And then I get this text, MSNBC calls the race for Hillary Clinton. And I walked right back into KPFK and said, I don't care what show you have on, you're putting me back on the air because this is bullshit. And they did. It was kind of awesome. They're a great radio station. But, I remember
show airs on KPFK.
Who ran with that story? AP. It was one AP story. It's easy to plant one AP story based on anonymous sources. Who ran with it that made it go? Rachel Maddow, MSNBC. They said no. And now the reason why I think MSNBC doesn't want me back on is because the day after the election, Trump wins. They start to pivot to Bernie. But what I'm trying to say is that I wrote a tweet that said no, you can't pivot like that. You can't make MSNBC Bernie channel now. No, look, if you're one of those people who are calling for the heads of Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Brazile for corruption at for the MSDNC I call it, then you must be calling for the heads of Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes. You do not the losers don't get to win. I'm sorry. So Chris wrote me back on Twitter, oh, gee, thanks, Josh. I was like, no, I mean it. You guys are culpable. They are culpable. They wanted to blame Susan Sarandon for losing the election. I mean, I wish Susan Sarandon was that powerful,
Well, you know what I say, Josh, you know what I say? I say, well, if Chris Hayes is going to blame Susan Sarandon for losing the White House, why the Democrats are also wiped out in the Congress, Senate, and the state. Who does he blame for the state houses? I bet it's Molly Ringwald.
Right. Gina Davis.
I mean, what the fuck is that? I mean, I can't. So Chris Hayes used to be a union reporter, and now this is what happens, Josh, when a corporation gives you $30,000 a day. That's how much those people make. Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, $30,000 a day, and they're our progressive voice. That's why people come to YouTube.
So you're telling me that that's not what we're. Because I submitted through my agency for this interview today that it was going to be at least, $2,500 a minute. And if that's what we talked about this, Jimmy, because to be honest, like I got, I got bills to pay and, I've got to buy banjo strings.
Oh no, definitely.
And,
definitely. We're going to do a crowd. We're going to do a GoFundMe after this so we can pay you.
$2,500 a minute at least, I think. So what is $30,000 a day? What is that in minutes, TV minutes? So that's $2,000 a minute.
That's
if they're on for an hour, and not including commercials. It's probably something like $2,500 a minute.
Yeah, it's only like that's a lot of money.
How can you report the news if you're making that much money? How can you even know what America is like if you're making that much money? You know what I have to say about this? You know, the rapid accumulation of wealth in this country, or any country, is a mental illness. Being a billionaire should be in the DSM-3, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses. Being a billionaire, having to be a billionaire, should be a mental illness. We talk a lot about minimum wage. We should talk about maximum wage. I mean, I think $999,999,999 is enough for any one person. I think, just call me crazy, but you hit $1 billion and you start having to give it back to everybody else. I think that would help us a lot, because the truth of the matter is, Jimmy, you know this. We are not in a system called capitalism anymore. Not when there are 8 people, count them 8 people, who have more money than the bottom 60% of this world. 8 people have more money than 60% of this world. That's not capitalism anymore. There's a word for that. It's called feudalism. Feudalism was the system that we overturned. We are the serfs. We should do a song called "We Are the Serfs" with all the rock stars. Because not even them, they don't even get into that bracket.
So it's amazing that we're supposed to get our progressive news from 1%ers. And that's who they are.
Right.
Oh, well, we get 1%ers. Yeah. And Brian Williams, who's a tool of the military-industrial complex, all he has to do to be rehabilitated is to laugh at Rachel Maddow's stupid fucking jokes for an hour.
I'm moving around a moment here.
Anyway.
Because I've got to plug my phone in.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, these people are clearly not the folks that are on the ground, that have any sense of what it's like to really be in America right now. Americans are hurting right now. Americans, you know that 60% of Americans don't have $1,000 in the bank?
Right. So if somebody has
more, I think it might even be $500.
$500.
That means if you have an emergency room bill, you will shut down everything in your house. That means if you have to go to the doctor, most Americans can't afford an emergency that will cost them more than $400.
Well, listen, I'm really a big supporter of the Draft Bernie party. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I love it. I was on their first phone call. I think it's a great idea. I want to see it happen.
So I'm all for the Draft Bernie movement, and it's good to hear that you're in on it too. I think we have to make a bold move. I think the people who have the control of the reins of the Democratic Party are never going to let go. And, as John F. Kennedy said, the people who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution, whatever that saying is. How come I can't remember that guy? Inevitable. I can never remember that saying. So I'm thinking this is the last gasp. If we can't get Bernie Sanders to take over a third party, it's obvious the corporate Democrats are worse than worthless, right? Because they make people go to sleep. And what the one silver line...
I mean, they also just their policies are wrong.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Let's just be honest. This is not like about personality. I remember when Ezra Klein put out this big piece about how great Hillary Clinton's personality actually was, but how it was being misinterpreted by people. Like it was all some kind of personality contest.
Yes.
And I just felt like this was super, super insulting. It was like, it's just not about their personality. Like it's like when people want $15 an hour for their minimum wage, and then Hillary Clinton comes out and says $15 an hour. It doesn't matter if she cooked you like a nice casserole and you had her over your house and she was told really great jokes. The truth of the matter is it was like 12 or 15, and the difference was between whether or not your kid could go to the doctor, or whether or not you could go to the doctor, or whether or not you had an extra bedroom for your children to live in, or you had to be in some kind of impoverished situation. This was like the most unbelievable. This is about policy. It's about fracking or no fracking. It's about pipelines or no pipelines. It's about having single health care or not having health care. It's about having a living wage or living in a subsistence way. Because why? Because Goldman Sachs and these fossil fuel industry doesn't want to pay taxes. That's what this is about. It's about outrage. So when you talk about a new party, it's not because we don't seem to kind of like the people who run the Democrats, and it's some sort of like, oh, we're not being ideological purists. We're trying to fucking survive. We're trying to have a planet that is worth living on, and we're trying to have lives that are not 100% like 70-hour work week with people working 3 jobs just to put themselves through school. That's what we're talking about. This is not the United States of America. We don't have, during Barack Obama, 95% of the recovery went to the 1%. That means not only was the recovery a sham, it means everyone else was living at below 2008 levels, but it also meant that the fucking 1% took the economy, turned it upside down like a kid shaking its money out of its pockets and putting it on the floor and in their own bank accounts. That's what the recovery was. It was another looting of the American people by the 1%. So honestly, like, if this is not about like a vanity contest or who likes somebody better, this is about what average Americans are dealing with on every single day of the week, and it's insulting to hear anything else. So yes, we need something new in American politics.
So let me ask you.
We're at a breaking point.
So Josh, I appreciate you coming on. I really do, and I want everybody to check out your new movie, which is called AwakeTheFilm.org. Check that out. AwakeTheFilm.org. Yeah. They can check. But I did want to ask.
The trailer is there.
I did want to ask you a question before I let you go, and then it just slipped out of my head. Hang on, I'll think about it. Oh, so the question I wanted to ask you before I let you go is, when people say, when you advocate for progressive politicians, and they say, oh, you're a purity test. I've seen everyone say that. I've seen almost every mainstream establishment news person say that. So what do you say when people say, to me, when somebody says, oh, you got a purity test, I'm like, the only people who are upset about my purity test are the people who can't pass it.
Okay, you're either pregnant or you're not. There's no in between. You're either for the corporations or you're for the people at this point. You're either for the basic standards of American life or you're not. And there's a lot of masquerading that happens, especially around identity politics, especially around issues where you can be symbolically correct, but actually incorrect. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like Hillary Clinton can say, that she is for civil rights, but when you look at her record and her record of her husband, really the honest thing is super predators. Really the honest thing is the crime bill that put in people in jail. You can say, you're for equal rights, but if you're not for decriminalization of marijuana, then you're for imprisoning mostly poor, mostly black people for jail terms that are outrageous and crazy, for the benefit of the prison industrial complex, right? You can say that you want to stop climate change, but if you're pro-fracking, it's a load of nonsense, because to be pro-fracking is a form of climate change denial. So, these are things, it's not about purity, it's actually about honesty. Can you pass the honesty test? Can you pass the fact test, right? Because truthfully, you cannot say that you're any of those. These are policies that are grounded in actual economic and scientific and civic realities, right? This is why Bernie Sanders is the most popular political figure in America right now, and why he's the most important political voice from America in the world right now, because he tells you the truth. He's saying, no, actually, we need single-payer health care because that's the only thing that will actually ensure all of Americans. We need no fracking because that's the only thing that will ensure a planet that we can live on based on climate and from the water. We need to have indigenous sovereignty. Like, you can't say, like, oh, I really sympathize with these indigenous tribes in America, and then say, but, we should have the pipeline anyway. Like, there are some issues which are stand and be counted moments. You know what I mean? There are issues which you stand and you are counted. And if you stand you can't be a little, it can't just be about like, are we going to pretend that we think these things are right when we're actually the party of lobbyists and the corporations and the 1%?
I'm with you 100%. I think when people say, oh, you're a purist, they mean, oh, you caught me. You caught me being corrupt.
Right.
You caught me
Right.
working against the people I said I was going to represent. You caught me working for the 1%. You caught me. That's what people mean when they say purist. And it's only fucking rich people who say that.
It's like a burglar in your house. Let's say you caught the burglar in your house, and they were taking your television, and they were taking your DVR, and you caught them, and you're like, you're in my house stealing my stuff, and they're like, well, we left you your silverware. What do you want to be, like a purist?
What are you?
You know what I mean? Like we left you like your toaster oven. Meanwhile they're walking out the door with everything else that you own. That's what's happening right now. So you call them a purist when they're robbing the American economy. Call them purists when they're raping the environment. Call them purists when they're taking every cue from the lobbyists and the corporations and the 1% and leaving you with nothing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes. And let's just be really super clear about what this actually is. There are buzzwords that get circulated as talking points by high-powered political operatives, and one of those buzzwords is purity test, right? They figured out that saying purity test somehow puts the onus back on you. It tells you that you've got to defend yourself against that. Oh my God, I'm not pure. I'm not pure. I'm sullen. I'm sullied. I'm dirty and full of spots, and my hands are I'm not pure. It's like it puts you on the defensive, and they know that. And these people who are in control of the media, they will get points on attack sheets and on spreadsheets that are given to them by industry and by media heads that say, well, the new thing now this week, it's all about purity tests, and that is really just a complete dumbing down of the conversation in America. And that we dumb that down to such a degree that it all of a sudden feels like we are ashamed of being pure. I mean, that's just nonsense.
I know,
right? It's like they do that in a way to because they know psychologically you fall into those tests. It's like a kind of psychological wedge talking. But what it really does is it makes the whole conversation on a fourth grade level that it should not be on.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, listen, Josh, I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us. We're going to tell everybody to go to awakethefilm.org. Check out
Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock. Awake, it's called Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock by myself, James Pion, Myron Dewey. Yes, go awakethefilm.org. I think on Earth Day it will be available for those donations between $1 and $100. Whatever you want to donate, we'll get you the rental, and all proceeds from the film go towards an Indigenous Media Fund and a Pipeline Fighters Fund.
Everybody, the next live Jimmy Dore show is April 3rd in Hollywood. There's only 50 tickets for that show, so get them quick. Our show after that is April 24th. That's in Burbank. Links for tickets right there. Get your tickets fast. Sell out quick.